Hi, I'm Mike Cherniffsky, and you are listening to This Podcast is Uncalled For. Welcome to the podcast. Heather will be joining us later. But today we want to talk about the use of pet names. You know which names I'm talking about. They're the words that, to borrow from South Park, get crossed out when you write Christian music. So you take regular songs, you cross out words like baby and darling, and you replace them with Jesus. You know, those types of names. There is a term for that. I'm not going to look it up right now, but there is a term to cover all these types of names. Why I wanted to talk about this is I don't like it when people who frankly don't know me, have never met me in person, would use these names as though we're in a relationship or something. So it's bad enough that I get babes and huns and darlings. I'm just going to the convenience store, and look, you don't know me. We're not in a relationship, so please don't use that kind of language towards me. Sir is perfectly acceptable. All right. And I know there's a joke there. In the military, you don't say sir to someone who's not an officer. Don't call me sir. I work for a living. But in this particular context, in a civilian context, it's perfectly fine. All right. What's not fine is having those terms of endearment used towards you by someone who, frankly, you don't know. And this came to a head for me this past Tuesday when I'm recording this. So, for context, this is someone I've been messaging with, but we never met. We have never met in person. So you can imagine how upset I would feel when they started this particular conversation on the Tuesday. Hello, darling. Hello. Once again, keep in mind, I have never met this person in person. So, how are you doing today, baby? I'm doing okay. So, this is me talking right now. Could you do me a huge favor, though, and not use pet names towards me? I really think this should be saved for when I'm in an actual relationship with someone. Hell, I don't like it when the cashier at the convenience store uses those pet names towards me. Well, what do you mean? Is this message for me? Well, yeah, clearly it is. Yes, I don't like being called baby or darling, so unless we're in a serious relationship, which we are not, never mind. Yeah. I can only imagine how women must feel in those situations. These are words I would not use unless I were in such a relationship. I'm sure Heather has a little more to add to that, and I'd be interested in hearing her take on this. But no, sir is perfectly acceptable for me. If you do know my name, Mike is fine. Michael, that's my legal name. guitar that's only really used by family. You know, and people insist use that. Don't ever call me Mikey. All right, I find that a little degrading. So don't call me Mikey. If you went to West, odds are you're calling me Ski, which is perfectly fine. No, my last name's Chernovsky, and so yeah, last syllable of my name, which is a admittedly difficult name for most people to spell, let alone pronounce. So Ski is perfectly fine. Ski Dog is acceptable. Just don't add some insults to it. I do distinctly remember Ski Tard at points. That is beyond offensive, and I won't accept it. I didn't accept it back in the name. I feel like I could probably handle it a little better now. So those are your options with me: Mike, Michael, Ski Dog, Mr. Chernovsky, Sir. Those are all acceptable, but baby, darling, honey, those types of ways, cutie pie. I'm certainly not cute, but those types of words. I try not to use them myself, unless it's in an appropriate context. And so yeah, that's all I'm going to say on the subject, and we're going to take a quick break, and I will let Heather talk about the women's perspective of such names. So back in a sec. All right, Heather, good to see you again.
Hi, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. How are you today, Michael?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm suddenly hyper aware of calling, like you or anybody else by their name. I mean, it would sound weird if all of a sudden I was like, "Hey, thanks, sugar dumpling, honey pie."
So for the record, Mike or Michael is fine.
Yeah, okay.
If you are a West guy, Ski is fine. Ski Dog is fine. Don't ever call me Mikey.
Okay, got you. Thank you. I'm not prone to Mikey myself, but Mike or Michael. I don't have as strong.
Yeah, I don't think Heather has that many nicknames to begin with. So.
Yeah. What up, Heath? It just doesn't, it kind of changes it. So I agree. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say that within the realm of what we're talking about. So do you want to introduce what we're talking about, or you kind of, where are we at? We're just jumping right in?
We're just jumping right in, because I've already done the preamble.
Yeah, I like it. So I, just as far as like being a woman in the world, I don't have probably as strong of a feeling as I've heard some women have regarding like being called pet names and things of that sort. Mm-hmm. I'm actually prone to pet names myself. Like when I'm substitute teaching, almost all the kids are sugar, because names are important, and how people feel about their name is important, and making sure people feel like respected and seen is important to me. And so being able to connect in students, like we live in a world where names and pronouns are a very relevant part of our culture and our social dynamics. And so recognizing those things is just something that's important to me. And there's a lot, and sometimes they change, and sometimes they change more than once. So sugar is just something that I've been able to kind of land with that is both gender neutral, pronoun neutral. It's just very like soft, but it's not sweetie. It's not too affectionate. But I could see like in your text messages. So you said she started out like that was, she'd been kind of
like after a couple of exchanges that sort of started, the babes and the darlings. We're not in a relationship. All we've done is message each other from time, and not even a regular thing. That's not a relationship. And again, I never met this person in person.
So if a woman calls you babe or baby, to you, that's a very intimate or affectionate term of endearment.
Exactly. Hun is another one.
Yeah. Yeah, hun, short for honey. I could see that as well. It's fitting right in there.
Yeah.
So are there like nicknames, and I don't want to use it like, because those are more like pet names.
Yeah.
Right? So outside of that, like, I don't know, are there any that you would see yourself being comfortable with?
I just went over a few.
Yeah, but I mean, like outside of that, like if somebody who didn't know you and was like, "Hey, man," for example, like is that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Sir.
Sir is a good one. Sir is a good one. And I raised my kids this way. I was raised, and I tell the kids all the time, foremost influential words in the English language are please, thank you, sir, and ma'am. Those 4 words in conjunction with each other will get open and close more doors and windows for you than any other words that there are.
Right, that's just being polite,
respectful, yeah.
Being polite.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you ever hear me say pal.
Yeah. Pal's a good one.
Not a good one.
Oh, so pal is one of those for you. That's like, bless your heart.
Yeah.
That's one of those that has that alternate meaning.
Have often died, that type of thing.
Okay. So if you're like, all right, pal, then I know you're like pissed off.
Yeah.
We're seeing Mike. So like if somebody was like, hey, Mikey, your response to that would be like, hey, pal.
Exactly.
What? Oh, okay.
That sort of thing, yeah.
So do you have a history with that particular name? With Mikey?
My mother used to, rest in peace.
Amen, yes.
She used to do that
misuse it. Yeah.
Misuse it from time to time. So, don't ever call me Mikey.
Yeah, I won't. Outside of this conversation, used for context, I won't. Because again, names are important. That's a thing. That is a thing. You know, again, as a woman, so I will speak and reference my experience, my lifelong experience with this. I have been pet named my entire life. I was getting coffee just the other day at a local coffee shop, and not naming them just for the sake that I love the coffee shop. It's the first time that's happened, and I don't want to cause them any negative repercussion. But yeah, he was like, "Hey, babe, what would you like for your coffee?" And I was like, "Huh." That's because for some reason, if he would have been like, I don't know, like, "Hey, ma'am," I guess wouldn't be bad at all. But babe in particular feels a little bit too forward,
right.
A little bit too close. Like, you don't know me at all, let alone well enough to call me babe, even though we are in person. Maybe especially because we're in person.
Yeah. I just had an experience like that just the other day too. Certain barbecue joints that shall remain nameless for the exact same reason, but I think regular listeners will know which one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Just called you out your name with a little pet name while you're in there?
Yeah, like, what can I get you for you, babe?
Yeah. And so is it different? I'll be completely honest. You are among the first men, and not to say that men don't feel this way, but you are articulating it and having that. I mean, that could very well be one of those kind of unspoken double standards that men and women kind of bear.
Double standard.
Yeah. Like if it's towards the man, you just kind of assume that it's okay. Whereas there's kind of a known condescending undertone, you know, whenever the pet names with women. It's particularly scenarios. I think the scenario base is a really important part of that because context is always important, right? And so one of the more difficult environments for me is any kind of business environment. Having a conversation, engaging in business negotiations, or just any kind of parameters, just kind of educational. We're having an open conversation, and it's like, okay, hun, or babe, or any kind of pet name at that time, because it always seems to carry this, like, you know, just sit in your spot, you know, kind of. It just has that condescending undertone as part of it. It's just part of that package. Do you think that, as far as men go, that's the intention behind it?
I definitely think there's some sexism in there.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that it's ever not that? Do you think it's
That's
ever
a
not?
great question. Well, it's certainly not professional.
Agreed. Agreed. In
I-
any context, it's not professional.
If this is an employment situation, it's sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Period. You know?
It does end up. It does end up in that way. Like it's hard to, because also as a woman, like the safe rejection. I watched a video the other day, and us and social media and just everything is so different now. Like your just exposure to things and perspectives is so different, and algorithms play such a big play into it. But I saw a video the other day, and it was she was a married woman, and she was she got on and she was sharing this awesome experience about a random man that hit on her publicly. And she's like, she's a beautiful woman, and she's walking down the street, and this guy hollered out to her, letting her know that she was a beautiful woman, asked if he could talk to her, and he immediately followed up with, "I am safe to say no to." And she was like, I ended up telling him I was married, like it wasn't a big deal, and it's, how do we talk to each other if we can't just talk to each other?
Right.
But we do live in a world where he was aware enough to say, and by the way, I'm safe to say no to, because there's an element of that, especially again, like in a workplace or in a business scenario, where, the proper way to counter that or to close that without, because a lot of times friendliness, I will speak again from my experience as a woman, but this may be true for men too, where just friendliness will be taken as a like an indication of being available or interested. And it's how do we as women, how do we learn, or again as probably men also, but how do we as humans, when interacting in that space, know when and where is it safe to say no thank you without having negative repercussion and negative kickback?
Right.
Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Well, it's one of those things, being on the spectrum, that's I have difficulty with,
Yeah.
So for me, words like that do have a higher meaning.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't use those words unless I knew for sure. Otherwise, I would be taken out of context. And not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like, as in a man's position, we do live in a world that's very difficult or there's just not a lot of spaces for men to mess up in that way. We kind of assume malicious intent with men, and we've gotten here for good reason. We needed to be able to reach a point where women could say no safely, and that needs to be a real conversation. But part of that conversation is, there's also this villainization of men that should also be accounted for, I think, to a degree. So, how does a man safely, if there is interest or, if they're wanting to approach that conversation, what does a safe approach look like now? You know what I mean?
I don't think just speaking for myself, I don't think there's ever been a safe approach.
Really?
Really.
Why? What do you?
Well, certainly when I was younger, if I were to make that approach, I would come this close to being killed.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That's awful. By the girl you were trying to talk to?
By her significant other that I don't know anything about.
Oh, that's brutal.
Yeah.
So engaging with a woman who is actually also with somebody else that you don't know about.
Right.
And you're engaging what you think is just the two of you, and then had violent repercussions by a third party that you weren't aware of.
Right.
That's terrible. But that would be, that's kind of a bad human thing. Like, shame on her for that space.
Shame on them.
Did he knew? Oh, really? So he knew as well? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And that's the reason I remained single at age 45.
I think there's a lot to be said. Now, Kansas City is not known for its dating climate anyways.
I had Did you get around to listen to the rest of the podcast? Just
I have listened to a number of them. I don't want to say that I've listened to all of them
and
yet.
you probably heard the one where I had a dating expert on. He asked that exact question.
Yes, yeah.
And I think that is a combination of a couple of things, like people coupling early.
Yeah.
That's a big one. And of course, being so spread out plays another role in that. So it's a complex thing.
Yeah. Specifically here in Kansas City, you think?
Specific to KC, yes.
Yeah. I could see that. I have never, and because this is relevant specifically with like the pet names and stuff like that, like I've never been on a dating app of any kind. And so I would struggle with that space, especially in a virtual context. Like if you, like you said, if we've never met and you're honey baby sugar pie and me, I would immediately be like, this is not real. Like, and then that's an important component for me in any situation, is just to feel real and authentic in that space. I guess.
I can also tell you from experience in apps and websites before apps were a thing. That's the way scammers operate.
So tell me about that.
Okay, so the big one was 20 years ago. I was working security at the time, so another context where it's hard to meet women.
Yeah.
Although I did meet my first girlfriend in when I was working security.
Okay.
Right. Like, day for a month.
Yeah.
But she was from Russia. This is the old Slobodskoy story, because that's where she was supposed to be from, in Russia. And got to a point where I got conned out of $2,000.
Like, because you were trying to, would she,
Yeah,
like she needed help,
I
and
need
you're
the
trying to
money
help
so I
her?
can fly to you. That sort of thing. Yeah. So, fortunately, the guys that did it were caught.
Yeah.
And put on trial in Russia. And I, for a couple of years, received regular updates from the Russian government.
No way.
I'm serious.
That is wild.
ICE got involved a little bit as well. But I didn't get trouble or anything. That they were.
Well, no, you were
facilitating everything. Yeah.
So in that interaction, did it start out? I mean, like normal conversation, and then grew to the kind of pet names.
It might come to pet names. Again, it was 20 years ago,
Yeah.
so I don't have a firm memory of that. But I do remember the profile said she was local.
So my hesitation with, and I like, there's just, I don't know, I don't have time or patience for anything that feels like inauthentic. And so it's hard to imagine connecting with anybody like that in a virtual space. Not to say that it doesn't happen, you know, like I know people that have had positive experiences and are with really, really phenomenal partners that they've met in those spaces. But like I have social media platforms. I don't have Snapchat, but I do have like Instagram, and I have Facebook, and I have TikTok. And I will get occasional messages. I say occasional. I will get a decent number of messages that go like into my spam folder that are just, you know, hi beautiful, and it's like beautiful is another one of those words. It's like, you know, I don't know. Beauty is easy, and that's just like an easy thing to say. And
Right.
people. Like we are just so much more, there's so much more depth to human interaction and things like that. And so it just feels this, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine responding to all of those, or any of them actually, but like, what does that even look like? Like, hey, like, thank you, I don't know. It just feels inauthentic, and therefore, I just don't even, like, I just don't even engage. I'm not necessarily mad at them or think that anybody has done anything inherently wrong, but maybe within that are some scammers, just people trying to get me to engage, to be like, you know, hey, you know. And I've heard of, so on the other side of it, I might have done some kind of like deep dives into different scams and stuff like that, because you hear about stuff going on and you're like,
Right.
how does that even happen? You know, like you send me 5,000 so I can send you 25,000. Like it doesn't, you know, but I know people that have done that. Like it came from like what they perceive to be a legitimate place.
Right.
And you know, or they think they're helping somebody out or whatever it might be, and then it's just a total scam. But that's a different topic.
Yeah.
That would be another good one though.
That might be another good one.
Yeah,
So.
it would be.
It's done bad scams. Yeah.
So outside of like a business scenario, like out in public, I think it's mostly, and granted, you know, people don't know your name until they know your name.
Yeah.
So
Which is
what
why
would be,
sir is perfectly
Yeah.
acceptable.
well, but as a woman, I mean, ma'am, some women are real sensitive about ma'am. Like, I'm not, I don't mind, but like some women are real sensitive because it kind of implies like an older woman.
Right.
You know, and like, yes, ma'am. It's like, I am not your mother. And it's, you know, so what do you
Or
think?
in a military context, don't call me sir, I work for a living.
Yeah.
Do not say sir to anyone who's not a second lieutenant or
Yeah. So what would be in your thought, what would be an appropriate for like somebody who doesn't know a woman's name or a man's name? What is an appropriate way to approach them? Address
ma'am
them.
is fine. Ma'am
Yeah.
is fine. Miss if it's a younger woman.
Oh, Miss is good. Okay. Hey, Miss. Excuse me, Miss. I could see that. I like that. Okay. And then let's say if you can't use sir, you know, and then wanted to get a gentleman's attention, what's something other than sir that would be an appropriate, like, hey, handsome, that still feels a little too pet
Yeah,
lady.
that's pet
This is one of those moments I wish you could see your face.
I feel in the English language that
That's just like, hey, beautiful, right? Like, that's just as much just like,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. So, sir is about it.
sir's about it for men.
Yeah. That's another, I guess, kind of double standardy, right?
Right.
Okay. So, no pet names unless you're in a relationship. But then in a relationship,
Yeah. It
pet
takes,
names. Yeah.
It would take time to develop pet names. So.
Yeah. Kind of develop and understand. Like, do you think when it comes to things like pet names that they just kind of pick themselves? Like there's like a natural
wouldn't know.
evolution of
I
something?
wouldn't know.
Yeah. So in my long-term relationship with my girl's dad, our pet names for one another were just things that we just said. I'm trying to think of, like, even for our daughters. Even for, like, my daughter Sydney is Squidney, and Squidness. In my phone, she's Squidness the Incredible. It, you know, like, it's very much a pet name, but it is entirely different than you know, like Babe or Honey.
Right.
You know. Now, granted, you know, being my daughter, if I was to be like, hey, sweet girl, hey, sweetie, hey, love, like, it's totally appropriate because she's.
Yeah.
But if I was to, like, back to the school context, you know, if I was like, hey, love, hey, sweetie, you know.
Yeah.
To-
The lawsuits are coming.
Yeah. Well, and that's why, like, again, I've landed with Sugar because it's this, like, totally, like, neutral, but not too personal, not too sweet one that I can. Because I also think that when it comes to human connection, part of the reason that nicknames exist and pet names exist is that they are terms of endearment. You know, it's an extension of the relationship, which is why you're like, it doesn't hold space here. Like, we don't have this extension of the relationship in this space.
Right.
But
Totally professional here.
yeah, right? Yeah. Yeah. Huh. So what's your least favorite of all the pet names? What's your least favorite? The one that gets you, other than Mikey, because that's totally off the table. But
Pretty much any.
Any of them?
Any of them. Yeah.
you don't have one that like triggers you more than any of the rest?
Not really. Not really.
Yeah.
The ones that really trigger me are the
Yeah.
insulting ones. Like, going back to high school, I can't believe I have to bring this up, but skeetard. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's offensive.
It is offensive. Absolutely. Sometimes there's room for everybody to grow. Like if you are somebody that is using a word thinking that it is appropriate because of your context and you are just now learning that it is not, that's okay. There was I was in a conversation. It was one of those lessons. I was having a conversation, and I've never been one to use that word in the context of reference of a person at all. It would just be, I say just, but it would be in the context of like a scenario or a situation like, oh my gosh, that's skitard. And and this is just culturally, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and that was one of the, like Whatever Loser, it was just kind of in this collaborative word bank. And I was sitting there having a conversation with a very good friend and her daughter, who is special needs, who is an exceptional young woman. And we're just sitting there having a conversation. Again, not anywhere in context about a human being at all. We were talking about a scenario, and the scenario was not okay. And I said, that's blank. And, when you can feel when you mess up. And she didn't say a thing. She wasn't mad at me. She wasn't disrespectful to me at all, but her entire energy shifted. And it took, for me, it was that scenario. Nobody had ever talked to me about it or anything like that. It just wasn't a thing until that very moment. And I learned in that moment exactly how inappropriate and wrong the use of that word was at all. It just holds no place. Yep. And through that, and this was a number of years ago, but there are a number of words in that space that just hold no place. They just hold no place, and it's because they've been misused to such an intentional and hateful degree that they just hold no place. It doesn't, you can feel how you want to feel about a lot of things, but there's just no place there.
Right. The N-word is a good example of this.
Yes, absolutely. And the reality of any word could be that. If you were using language to intentionally demean, diminish, hurt people, if you were intentionally using language to be hateful, you could make any word a word that is no longer holds a place. And that's honestly, that's the power of intention and human connection and human communication, just do better kind of thing. But well, very cool.
So I hope today's episode gives you pause and think before you speak, think before you write anything. Who knows, maybe you might mean one thing and it'll come off as something incredibly offensive to whoever you're talking to. So just think before you speak and think before you write. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and wrap this up. So, this podcast is Uncalled For. It's hosted, produced, and edited by myself, Mike Chernovsky. We had our co-host today, Heather Marie. Our opening music is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. And our outro music for today will be Honey Pie by Chamomile. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 United States license. And you can find this at freemusicarchive.org.
If you are in the United States or Canada, you can call us at 816-832-5160. Leave your message or question for us, and if we like it, we will play it on the podcast. Please support the podcast and purchase our exclusive Uncalled For merchandise. T-shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, stickers, and so much more. Go to www.cafepress.com/uncalledforpod. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.